The evening air was thick with the scent of spices drifting from nearby homes, the quiet hum of distant prayers blending into the night. Street lights flickered, casting long shadows on the narrow roads, while a warm breeze rustled the curtains of a modest house tucked between rows of similar homes. Inside, the sound of soft laughter echoed from the kitchen, Aisha's voice, light and full of life. She moved with ease, setting plates on the table, unaware that this ordinary moment would soon become a memory frozen in time. To the outside world, Aisha was just like any other young woman, kind, curious, full of dreams too big for the walls that confined her. But beneath the surface she carried a secret, one she had held onto for months, protecting it like a fragile ember. A secret that, if discovered, could change everything. In that same house, her father, Ibrahim, sat in quiet contemplation. The weight of tradition and expectation rested on his shoulders, shaping every decision, every belief. For him, family and faith were not just guiding principles, they were unshakable, non-negotiable. And then the moment came. A conversation behind closed doors, words exchanged, some pleading, others firm, voices rising, then a sudden eerie stillness. A silence that would never be forgotten. By morning, whispers filled the neighborhood. Doors cracked open, curious eyes peering out, searching for answers they weren't sure they wanted to hear. Something had happened inside that house. Something no one dared to say aloud. What really took place that night? How did love and devotion turn into something that would send shockwaves far beyond those four walls? And what does this tell us about the cost of defiance? This is Aisha's story. And once you hear it, you will never forget it. Stay with us as we uncover the choices, the hidden fears, and the moment that changed everything. And if you haven't already, subscribe and like this page for more true crime stories that will keep you watching until the very end. Aisha was the kind of person people never forgot. She had a way of making others feel seen, of filling a room with warmth just by being in it. Her laughter was effortless, her kindness unmatched. Friends adored her, teachers admired her. To the world, she was a young woman with a bright future, one who had everything ahead of her. But beneath the surface, something was changing. It started quietly, a thought, a question, a feeling she couldn't shake. At first she ignored it, pushing it to the back of her mind. But curiosity is a powerful thing. It tugs at you, refuses to let go. And soon, Aisha found herself searching for answers in places she never expected. A book hidden under her school bag. Late nights staring at her phone, absorbing words she wasn't sure she was even allowed to read. Each discovery made her heart race. Part excitement, part fear. Because in her world, asking certain questions meant stepping into dangerous territory. She kept her secret locked away, convinced she could balance both lives, that she could be who she was expected to be while silently holding on to what she was becoming. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. They leave traces, small, almost invisible at first. A moment of hesitation before answering a question, a look over the shoulder that lasts too long, a tension in the air that others start to notice. Then came the first sign that the walls were closing in. A single text message, short, simple, but enough to send a chill through her spine. I think they know. Ibrahim was a man of unshaken beliefs. To outsiders, he was respected, a man who lived by discipline, tradition, and faith. To his family, he was the authority, the one who made the rules and ensured they were followed without question. Everything he did was for his family. At least, that's what he told himself. For years, his world had been predictable. His children were raised to follow the same path as their ancestors. There was safety in obedience, in structure, in knowing that everyone played their part, and for the longest time, Aisha did. She was the daughter who never caused trouble, the one he never had to worry about. But something had changed. It started as a feeling, an unease creeping into his mind like a shadow in the dark. At first, it made no sense. Aisha had always known her place. She knew the rules. She couldn't turn away from everything she had been taught. Yet, she was different now. The way she spoke had changed. There was hesitation where there had once been certainty. She avoided his gaze. She left the house without saying where she was going. There were whispers when she thought he wasn't listening, hushed conversations cut off the moment he stepped into the room. Then came the moment that confirmed his worst fear. A careless mistake. A single piece of paper left in her room, a note scribbled in a shaky hand. Words that shouldn't have been there, words that shattered everything he thought he knew. The truth hit him like a blow. Aisha had crossed a line she could never return from. At first, he didn't believe it. He refused to. He confronted her, demanded an explanation, but she met him with silence. That silence enraged him more than words ever could. Denial turned to anger. Anger turned to something colder, something dangerous. Ibrahim knew what people would say, that he had lost control, that he had failed as a father. A dishonor like this would never be forgotten. It would stain the family's name, leave a mark that could never be erased. Some in the community whispered their concerns. Others stood behind him, their voices firm. A man must do what is necessary to protect his honor. Psychologists call it an obsession with control, a belief so deep-rooted that it overpowers love, overpowers reason. A way of thinking where a daughter's life means less than the weight of a name. For Ibrahim, this was not a choice. In his mind, the decision had already been made. The night was silent, but something in the air felt wrong. It was the kind of stillness that made the walls seem closer, the air thicker, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Aisha had felt it all day, the weight of unspoken words, the heaviness in her father's stare. Something had shifted. Something was coming. She sat on her bed, gripping the edges of her blanket, her thoughts racing. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the tension in the house was just another bad day, something that would pass. Then came the knock, sharp, deliberate, final. Aisha didn't move at first. The air around her seemed to freeze, trapping her in place. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, louder than the sound of her own breath. She reached for the door, hesitating for just a second before opening it. Her father stood there, his expression blank, too blank. Behind his eyes there was something she had never seen before, something unreadable. He said nothing at first, just looked at her, studied her. Then, in a voice that was too calm, he told her to come with him. Aisha swallowed hard. She wanted to refuse, wanted to say she was tired, that they could talk in the morning. But there was no room for arguments. His stance, his tone, everything about him told her that this was not a request. She followed him through the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps slow, reluctant. Every part of her wanted to turn back, to run, but fear kept her rooted in place. They stopped in the kitchen. The single overhead light flickered, casting shadows along the walls. Her father's hand rested on the table, fingers drumming against the wood. His breaths were deep, controlled. Then he reached for something. Aisha's stomach twisted. She took a step back, her pulse hammering in her throat. "Baba," she whispered, but her voice barely carried. His grip tightened around the handle of the blade, and then everything unraveled. A blur of motion, the scrape of metal against the air, a desperate struggle, a cry swallowed by the silence of the night. Neighbors would later recall hearing something, a muffled sound, too brief to question. But in that moment, inside those walls, time seemed to stretch. The final seconds were slow, drawn out like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Aisha's body gave one last tremor before the world around her faded into nothingness. And then, there was only stillness. The morning brought discovery. A door left slightly open. A house that no longer felt like a home. Authorities found her where she had fallen, the life drained from her body, her dreams cut short in the place she had once felt safe. The weapon, cold, lifeless, was left beside her, as if it too had played its role and had no more purpose. Ibrahim sat in silence, not shaking, not panicked, just still. Some called him a monster. Others defended him, their voices quiet but firm. He did what had to be done. But as the world outside continued to move, as whispers spread and the weight of his actions settled into reality, one truth remained. Aisha was gone, and nothing could bring her back. The morning air was still, almost unnatural. The quietness that settled over the neighborhood felt wrong, as if the world itself was holding its breath. It was only when the first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains that reality set in. The police arrived at the scene after an anonymous call. No one knew exactly who had made it. Perhaps a neighbor, perhaps someone inside the house who couldn't bear the weight of what had happened. But by the time officers stepped through the door, the truth was already written in the walls, in the eerie silence that filled the home. Ibrahim was there, waiting. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He sat at the table, his fingers resting on the smooth wooden surface, his gaze distant. When an officer approached him, he simply raised his hands, surrendering without a word. But it wasn't guilt that filled his eyes. It wasn't a regret. It was something else, something unreadable. The officers moved carefully, scanning the room, taking in every detail, the overturned chair, the faint marks on the floor, the stillness that hung in the air like a ghost. And then, their eyes fell on what had been left behind. Evidence that told a story without words. There was no denying what had happened. Ibrahim was taken into custody without resistance. As they led him out of the house, neighbors stood outside, watching in silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered among themselves. And then there were those who said nothing at all because deep down, they knew. Inside the police station, the air was thick with tension. Investigators worked quickly, piecing together the events of the night. But one question lingered. Would he confess? The interrogation room was small, cold, almost suffocating. A single camera captured everything. The way Ibrahim sat, still composed, his expression never shifting. When an officer finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air, he barely blinked. Why? For a moment, there was nothing. No reaction. No emotion. Then, he spoke. His words were measured, deliberate. He didn't deny what had happened. He didn't try to shift the blame. He explained his actions in the same way someone might explain a decision they had thought through for years. The room was silent as he finished speaking. Even the officers, who had heard it all before, felt the weight of his words pressing down on them. But the investigation was far from over. As officers searched deeper, more questions surfaced. Had anyone else known? Had anyone helped him? Some whispered that the family had been aware of what was coming, that there had been quiet conversations behind closed doors, warnings that had gone ignored. Had they stayed silent out of fear? Or was their silence something more? A psychologist later analyzed his behavior, watching the interrogation footage closely. Every movement, every shift in his tone. What makes a person do something like this? Is it anger, belief, fear, or is it something else entirely? The case was unraveling, but one thing was certain. Ibrahim believed he had done nothing wrong. And that, perhaps, was the most chilling part of all. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that weighed heavily on everyone present. Reporters filled the gallery, cameras flashed, and whispers of anticipation rippled through the crowd. It wasn't just a trial, it was a moment that had captured national attention, sparking debates in homes, places of worship, and on news channels worldwide. Ibrahim sat in the defendant's seat, his face unreadable. The same calm that had been present during his arrest remained. No visible emotion, no sign of remorse. Just an unwavering stillness that unsettled even those who had come prepared to see justice unfold. The prosecution painted a picture of a man whose beliefs had led him to make an irreversible choice. They presented the evidence meticulously, witness testimonies, text messages, and forensic findings. Every detail was laid bare for the jury to see. The defense, however, argued from a different angle, weaving a narrative about cultural expectations, personal convictions, and what they claimed was a moment of desperation rather than intent. But the most anticipated moment was yet to come. When the judge finally addressed the courtroom, the tension was palpable. The verdict had been reached, guilty. There was no outburst, no dramatic reaction from the accused. He simply listened, expression unchanged, as the weight of the decision settled in. But outside the courtroom, emotions ran high. Some called it justice. Others saw it as an attack on tradition. Family members, torn between grief and loyalty, reacted in different ways. Some distanced themselves, unable to reconcile what had happened. Others defended him, believing that his actions, while extreme, were rooted in something deeper. Activists took to the streets, some demanding stronger protections for individuals facing similar threats, while others argued that personal beliefs and family values were being scrutinized unfairly. The media dissected every angle, fueling discussions that stretched far beyond the trial itself. Religious leaders were also drawn into the debate. Some preached forgiveness, calling for unity in a time of division. Others urged people to acknowledge the harsh realities that still existed in many communities, silent struggles, hidden fears, and the need for change. Beyond the trial, the case left a lasting impact. Laws were re-examined, policies debated, and awareness campaigns launched. Conversations that had long been avoided were now taking place in public forums, in homes, and in places of worship. The courtroom was now empty. The voices that once filled it with heated debates, testimonies, and verdicts had faded. The cameras had turned away. The world has moved on, as it always does. But for those left behind, the wounds would never fully heal. Somewhere, a mother still mourned. A sibling still replayed old memories, grasping onto moments that could never be relieved. A friend still stared at unread messages, wondering if something, anything, could have changed the course of what had happened. But this isn't just one story. It is a reflection of a much larger reality. Across the world, thousands of young women face similar dangers, silent battles hidden behind closed doors, choices that are met with fear instead of understanding. Some escape, finding safety before it's too late. Others, like Aisha, do not. The statistics are staggering. Every year, countless individuals lose their lives due to beliefs that place honor above humanity. And yet, so many cases remain unheard, lost in the shadows of silence and fear. And now, the question remains: how many others are living in fear right now, afraid to be themselves? Have you ever had to hide a part of yourself just to feel safe? Have you ever been forced to choose between family and the life you truly want? And most importantly, if someone close to you was facing this same struggle, would you recognize the signs? Would you know how to help? Let's talk about it in the comments. This story is over, but the conversation should not be. If you or someone you know is in danger, don't wait. Speak out. Raise awareness. Support organizations that help those in need. Because change only happens when voices refuse to be silenced. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because these are the stories that must be told, the ones that must never be forgotten.